Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to my channel. I am Crystal, and this is Homemaking on the Homestead. And I am doing some baking today. This is a kitchen day. Outside is still covered in snow and ice. We've had more snowstorms than an ice storm, so we've got like layers of ice on top of snow. However, it did start raining, and so things are slowly warming up, which I am so excited about. But of course, as the temperatures drop, all that rain just turns into a slick sheet of ice. So we still haven't actually been able to get out of the house, but such is life. I am going to just make good use of this afternoon. So as you can see back here, I am all set up to make some bread. And I'm going to make our regular 2-loaf bread recipe. I'm doubling it for 4 loaves. So I am making us our everyday bread, and because we're almost out, and then I am going to take the other 2 loaves. I'm turning one of them into cinnamon rolls and the other into pepperoni bread, pepperoni cheese bread. This recipe has been was an absolute favorite of my kids, and I haven't made it in so long, but I thought it would be great, especially to have some of it in the freezer. And usually that's what I do when I make a lot of bread. After everything cools, I slice everything up, put it into Ziploc bags, and put it into the freezer so that we can just pull out what we need when we need it. So I am excited to show you today what I'm doing and what I've got going on. So come along with me while I bake some bread. This bread recipe is super easy to make, and the ingredients are pretty basic: milk and flour, salt, yeast, oil. And I've made this recipe many times, and I will have the link to it in the description box below. And also for the pepperoni bread, I have a little bit of cheddar cheese at the end of a bag here that I did want to use up. Same with the mozzarella. I had a little bit in a bag there to use up. And I have some pepperoni. I buy big packages of pepperoni at Costco and then divide it into smaller bags and put that into the freezer. So I pulled out one of those, and that is what we need, the basics for the pepperoni bread. The cinnamon rolls are going to be pretty simple: brown sugar, cinnamon, and butter. I have 2 cups of water already measured out into this measuring cup, and I am going to be adding 2 cups of milk to it. And then I'm going to heat this up in the microwave till it reaches about 110 degrees, the temperature necessary to activate the yeast. I always check my liquid with a thermometer to make sure that I'm not too hot, because that will kill the yeast. But I'm pretty much right on. It took about maybe a little over 2 minutes in the microwave, and I kept stopping and stirring just so it didn't get too hot. If your liquid gets too hot, you just have to wait and stir until it comes down in temperature. This particular recipe needs a little bit more yeast than most do, so for a double recipe, I am going to need 3 tablespoons. And the recipe calls for 2/3 cups of sugar. Again, this is a double recipe. Now that I have all that added, I am just going to stir this in, to stir the yeast in. And I'm going to let this sit for about 5 to 10 minutes to make sure that my yeast is nicely bubbling and it's completely activated. This is an important step, because if your yeast is weak or it's old, you need to know that before you proceed. Okay, don't know if you can see this, but my yeast is super bubbly and very strong and in good condition. It is time now to put this into my trusty Bosch mixer, which is about 20 years old or more. To get this going, I am going to add 2 cups of the flour called for in the recipe and mix this up. I am using avocado oil. You could also use coconut oil. Just make sure that you melt it first and that it's cooled down. You could use butter as well. And now I'm adding the salt. And now while my Bosch is running, I am going to start adding the rest of the flour 1 cup at a time until the dough starts to pull away from the sides of the bowl. Now that it's pulled away from the side of the bowl, I am going to let this knead for about 10 minutes. I added 11 cups flour, which was the max on the recipe. So my dough has been kneading for about 5 minutes now, and I am just going to throw a towel over the top of this and let it rise for about an hour. It needs to double in size. A lot of times people will put it into a bowl that's been oiled. I don't do that, just simply because once it's time to punch the dough down, it's a lot easier if it's in here and I can just turn the mixer back on and let that punch the dough down. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then I'm going to wait an hour or so until it doubles in size and bring you back. Well, my bread definitely doubled in size, and it has been a little less than an hour. We're going to turn the mixer on and punch it down. As you can see, the dough is a little bit on the sticky side, and that is okay. And I encourage you not to add any more flour to it. The more flour you add, the more dense the dough is going to become. Instead of flour, what I typically do is I spray my countertops with a little bit of avocado spray, non-stick spray, or something like that to help it not stick so much to the countertops. And the extra oil will help it not stick to your hands as much either. Now I'm going to cut my dough in half. To get the most uniform size of my loaves so that everything is equal, it bakes equally, I tend to like to weigh my dough out. So this first batch of dough here is just going to be my everyday loaves of bread. So I'm going to cut this in half and weigh those out. And I'm going to put those into my bread pans so that they can start the next rise. I will be letting the other batch of dough rise a second time, before I shape it into loaves, so that I can bake the bread first, and then I can bake my cinnamon rolls and my pepperoni bread second. I'm coating this with some olive oil, spray, or just oil, any kind of oil. Coconut oil would work too. And I'm lining each of these with some parchment paper, just because I want to make sure nothing sticks. And now it's time to just form a nice log with each of these and put them in the pan. And I'm going to cover these up and let these rise until they double in size, which will probably not take that long. My dough is just a little bit above the top of the bread pan, and I'm going to put these in the oven now. They will bake for 30 minutes at 350. Now it's time to start working on the rest of the dough. And like I did with the first loaf, I am going to cut this one in half and make sure that they are approximately the same size. The first loaf I am going to turn into cinnamon rolls. I do not have a recipe for the exact measurements. I just kind of eyeball them. I roll the dough out into a rectangle, and I roll it fairly thin. I think this one is about 16 by 12. And then I begin to put butter on it. And then I keep spreading the butter on until it has a nice coating. Once it's spread with butter, I then start sprinkling on brown sugar. After the brown sugar, I give it a good sprinkle of cinnamon and roll them up. And just like the bread pans, I spray my pan down with some avocado oil spray. And I put in a piece of parchment paper to keep them from sticking to the pan. Lots of people have their own ways of cutting up cinnamon rolls, and I just try to do it fairly simplistic. I use a pair of scissors. I kind of eyeball it right in the center and give it a cut, and then on each side I try to center it and cut it, and I just repeat that process. This usually gives me pretty even sized cinnamon rolls. After I cut them, I put them into a 9 by 13 pan. And I cover these, set them aside, and let them rise. To make the pepperoni bread, you're going to begin the same way by rolling out the loaf of dough into a rectangle. I'm going to lightly spread this dough with some butter. It doesn't really need a lot, but just a little bit to give it some moisture, flavor. And then I am sprinkling it with a little bit of garlic and some Italian seasonings. The next thing we're going to put on is the pepperoni. You can put on as much or as little as you like. We like to have them with a good amount of pepperoni. After the pepperoni, it is time for the cheese. I don't have specific amounts on these. Just think of it as like making a pizza. Kind of just put on whatever seems right. Usually I just use mozzarella, but because I have cheddar cheese available that I wanted to use up, I'm also adding some cheddar cheese. Any kind of cheese that you would like. And now we're going to roll it up just like we would a cinnamon roll. We're going to put this into a 9 by 13 pan that has been prepared just like we did the last one. I don't cut this up. This is the difference between this and cinnamon rolls, I just leave it as a whole loaf and kind of tuck it in there so it fits. I'm going to cover this and set it aside so that it can rise until it's about doubled. My cinnamon rolls have doubled in size, and so has my pepperoni roll. So I'm going to put those in the oven now. These will also bake at 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. Normally I frost my cinnamon rolls right when they come out of the oven, but today I do not have any powdered sugar, and I used it all up at Christmas time, didn't restock, and we haven't been able to get out, but that's okay. I am just going to spread them with some melted butter right now. They are going to taste delicious no matter what. Well, there you go, ladies. The efforts of my afternoon, and I am so happy with how it turned out. I've got lots of good baked goods now to put into my freezer, and it'll last us for quite a long time. I hope you enjoyed coming along with me this afternoon while I did all my baking. I hope it inspires you to maybe do some baking and put stuff away in your freezer. And I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said earlier, recipes are, the bread recipe itself will be in the description box below. So you saw what I did with it and what I turned that bread into. And let me tell you, this bread recipe is amazing. The bread is soft. It is perfect for doing whatever you want to with it. It would even make great dinner rolls, I think, too. All right, ladies, I think that wraps up this video. And like I said, hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you did. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you like my content, would you consider subscribing? I would really appreciate that. All right, we will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.